Herman Deal, the real deal here. So today we're going to talk about fish. What type of fish should we eat? And one of the main reasons I'm going to talk about this is because it's convenient. Okay, if you can take one of these, open it up with a little spoon, eat, get 18 to 22 grams of protein. Boom, right away. You don't have to refrigerate. You don't have to worry. It's just a great way to get the omega-3 fatty acids, the protein, get your protein content. If we're building muscle as men over 40, I do believe it's important to get at least 150 grams of protein, ideally your own body weight, whatever you weigh. If you weigh 180, then ideally 150 grams of protein a day. Sometimes that's difficult to do, which is why it's important to have snacks like fish, sardines, to be able to eat them on the go. But there's really only two types of fish that I eat. Tuna, for example, has its risk factors. Now, I don't really like tuna that much. Um, but there's risks involved with tuna, and that's because it's a bigger fish, which means that they live longer, which means that they can then accumulate more mercury. So the smaller the fish, the less likely it's going to have lots of mercury. And often when they're smaller, they don't live as long either, so they don't accumulate mercury as much. Mercury has side effects. You want to be careful. You want to avoid that. So we have, on the one hand, we want to get our protein. This is convenient, having fish in cans. Yet we want to be careful and not just eat tuna all day, because they're a big fish and we will accumulate mercury. I personally, I just eat sardines, and I will eat cans of jack mackerel or chub mackerel. These are great because in one can of this costs like $2 or $3. Okay. You get 75 to 80 grams of protein in one freaking can. So this is a lot of protein. Great meal to have, and just boom, 75, 80 grams of protein. So I love these, but I'm only eating these two, sardines and jack mackerel. And then with jack mackerel, or mackerel, you have to be careful because there are mackerel that are big, different species of mackerel. You want to avoid those because, again, they live longer, they accumulate mercury, they're bigger. You want to make sure you get the small mackerel. And so I'm going to get into that now. So let's first look at why we want to avoid mercury toxicity, mercury poisoning. One of the main reasons is that, first of all, it's very hard to diagnose because most doctors don't assume mercury poisoning in the beginning. Oh, so yeah, I eat tuna every day. Oh, okay, tuna's pretty good. It's hard for doctors to then jump to the conclusion, okay, let's do a blood test, let's do hair analysis, which are two good ways to find out if you have mercury poisoning. The problem is that often doctors don't even jump to that conclusion. Fish toxicity isn't the first assumption, but look at all of these symptoms. All of these things could manifest as mercury poisoning: depression, ADHD, early cognitive decline. You could attribute that to just old age, so it's tricky to find the mercury poisoning. And here we show how COVID is very similar to mercury poisoning. The symptoms are very, very similar. And then if you're negative for COVID, they're going to suspect that first. If you're negative for COVID, then, oh, you just have the flu. And they never reach the conclusion that you may have mercury poisoning. So the way I look at it, to be safe, I just avoid the big, big fish. I mean, if I go to a really nice restaurant and I haven't eaten swordfish in years, I might get a swordfish. I might do that once, in a long while, or I might eat a tuna steak or something like that, but very, very rarely. I never do it consistently. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. If you eat one swordfish one day, you do that twice a year, you're going to be fine. But if you're doing it every week, every month, the more you do it, the more likely you're going to have problems. So talking about tuna, big variations in sizes of tuna. Here you can see one that is quite big. The chances of this tuna having mercury are much, much higher than a much smaller tuna. And then the ironic thing is that the bigger the tuna, the more expensive the tuna. Bluefin tuna, as you can see here, is a very large fish, and it will cost more. And as you go down and the tuna gets smaller, when you get to albacore or skipjack tuna, the price for that tuna is actually cheaper. So, I like to say often that you get what you pay for, but that's not the case always with tuna. There's an exception with tuna because the larger the fish, the longer it's lived, the more mercury accumulation it has, but it's going to be more expensive. And you don't want that. If you're going to buy tuna, if you want a variety of tuna, I don't really like tuna, but I know a lot of people do. Stick to albuquerque or skipjack tuna to be on the safe side to avoid mercury poisoning. Let's look at mackerel. King mackerel, Spanish mackerel, no way. Too big, too much mercury. I avoid those at all costs. What you want to buy at the store, you want to get either chub mackerel, Pacific mackerel, Atlantic mackerel, which is shown there. You can see it's a small fish, and Boston mackerel. So chub, Pacific, Atlantic, and Boston are the ones you want to pick for mackerel, not the king or Spanish mackerel. Too big. And here we have salmon. Salmon do vary in size, of course, but they are generally known for having low mercury compared to tuna and the largest mackerel, like king mackerel. So, salmon overall, it's going to be low in mercury, safe fish to eat in general. You don't really need to worry too much about mercury in salmon. But I just wouldn't eat it every day. I feel better eating even smaller fish like anchovies or sardines every day. I wouldn't necessarily want to eat salmon every single day. This is a good list to keep in mind. Lowest mercury. I would feel totally great eating these things every day. Small fish like sardines, anchovies, herring, sprats. They're going to have very little mercury. Moderate, I would keep this to once, maybe twice a week. Salmon, chub mackerel, skipjack tuna. It's nice to know that, if you want to mix tuna, like mixing the tuna with the sardines can be tasty. But then to get skipjack tuna, you don't want to get the high like Albuquerque ribeye tuna. You want to avoid those. And not more than once a year, I mean, or once every 6 months, I would not eat swordfish on a regular basis at all, nor king mackerel or shark. I don't think I've ever eaten shark. So this is just a good list to keep in mind when you are going to eat fish. I hope that was helpful in helping you decide which fish to eat. And something interesting as I was doing this research, like for example, why don't you see much canned salmon out there? You see canned tuna everywhere. You see a lot of canned sardines, but you don't see canned salmon or canned mackerel, at least not in the small cans like this. There's a reason for that, okay? You remember, constantly getting marketed to. Reason number one is there's a lot more tuna out there. So tuna is easier to process, cheaper to put in small cans like this. Salmon, not as easy. And big reason, tuna looks cleaner. If you're going to put salmon in a small can like this, you might see the bones. And from a marketing perspective, people know that, well, the people who are doing the marketing, who are manufacturing the fish, yeah, people don't want to see bones. Bones scares people. Not me. I know bones are healthy. I love bones, okay? And in lots of sardines and in the mackerel, because here you see the whole fish, the bones are sort of like hidden, but even the mackerel's in a big can like this, not in a small can like this, generally speaking, because if you try to fit the mackerel into a small can like this, you are going to see the bones. The sardines are small enough that they're the little fillets and the bones are hidden on the inside. Tuna is just a cleaner fish to manufacture because there's a lot of big tuna, so there's a lot of meat, so you don't have the bones. So people think, you don't see the bones, it doesn't freak people out. But just understand that you're always getting marketed to. That's constantly happening. Everything you eat, everything you choose to eat, someone was thinking behind that, marketing to you. And you want to know that, for example, bones are good to eat, especially fish bones that you can crush if they're really small. You can eat them with no issues at all. And so it's just interesting, why you don't see salmon in cans. Interesting information. In any case, thank you for watching. I will be back next Monday with another video episode, and Thursday I'll be out again with Mr. Skeptical. Bye.